Welcome into Flag for Discussion, episode 54 for Monday, December 22nd. My name is Farbod Merkazi. I'm here as always with Jace Hatfield. The first round of the playoffs is now in the books. There were some results that we fully expected. There were some blowouts that we fully expected. There were some results that I don't know. Miami A&M seemed like how we thought Oklahoma, Alabama would go. And there were multiple games that were just tale of two halves. Jace, when you were watching those games, is the national champion amongst any of those teams?
No, I do not think we watched the national champion play this weekend, unfortunately. I would have loved, I wish the Ducks had given me the confidence to say yes to that. And if we did, if I had to pick one, Ole Miss looked damn good. That Ole Miss team looked much better than I'd expected them to come out looking like with just the coaching changes and everything. So if I had to pick one of these teams that I was confident could keep moving, Ole Miss gave me a lot of confidence. Although we'll get to this a little bit later, but there were some like potential injuries that came out of that late.
Yeah. So obviously we're going to talk about all the first round games. We're going to talk about Alabama storming back and beating Oklahoma, Miami beating A&M. We have a little CFP Secret Santa segment because we'll have another show before Christmas. But if you are celebrating Christmas, celebrate it with us. Happy holidays to everyone out there. It's crazy that we get to say that on a pod still. Then we talk about Oregon JMU, Ole Miss Tulane, and we have a little bit more clarity on, I guess the saying would be unclarity or whatever that is on the Michigan coaching search. We have clarity on who it's not going to be. And there's this thing we thought was going to wrap up within a couple of days is now extended to over a week and a half now at the time of recording. And we're going to have to see who could Michigan hire now, because it seems like Kalen DeBoer and Kenny Dillingham are out of the picture. Make sure you are following us on Jace. We can. If you're not watching on YouTube, if you're just listening on podcast, Jace just signing himself up for the opportunity. I think if you want the job, we have to pull it like the Penn State search. I think you probably have to wait like 50 days of the job being open. The Penn State search was like day 52 when we made you available for the job.
Yeah, if Michigan doesn't have a coach in 50 more days, I actually might not be far off from the list of coaches. If they get that far without one, I might be in within the top 5,000 options, which is pretty good, all things considered.
Hey, look, same thing I asked you for the Penn State. If you get the head coaching job, make me your GM, and we'll have some fun. At least for 1 year before they fire us, and before they fire us,
we're taking Michigan to the promised land. We're winning ethical natty if we go to Michigan. I'm calling it now.
I don't know if that exists there. All right. Make sure you are following us on Twitter at F4Discussion, on TikTok at Flag4Discussion, or on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts at Flag for Discussion spelled out. By the way, if you're following us on Twitter, I hope you join the bracket challenge and the Bowl Mania challenge that Flag for Discussion is putting on. Jace is on a absolute heater in Bowl Mania. I think you're still undefeated. Running away with this, and yeah, this is ridiculous. As you mentioned yesterday, you were just in a flow state as you were making those picks, or you are the insider of the insiders. And as we have been saying all year long, don't listen to the paid media talking about college football. Listen to the truth tellers that Flag for Discussion, because we're doing this for the love of the game. Maybe one day paid. Who knows? Maybe if we
you need me to pick spreads, I'm not your guy. You need me to pick money lines, I got you. And maybe that means, now that I'm thinking about this, maybe I need to change my spreads approach next. I think maybe like when I see the number, I get in my head about, can they cover that? Can they not? Maybe I just need to think, you know what? Screw the number. Who's the better team? And then I'll just go that route, because it's clearly doing me a lot better when I go that way than it is when I try to get too into the weeds of it.
At the risk of expanding this tangent before we actually start talking the show, the first half of the year when I was killing our pick segments, I think I was just picking like based off of gut. And I think the second half, I started getting into my head about like, well, maybe this team can cover. I think this is the overall winner. And that's how our picks became super close. But you know what? We won't have a pick segment for another year. We'll get into games that actually happened. Alabama just stormed back, down 17 to beat Oklahoma 34-24. I think I wrote 25 in the doc, but it's 24. Oklahoma scored on 3 of its first 4 possessions. They forced 3 consecutive 3-and-outs. At the time that they were up 17-0, they were outgaining Alabama 135-12. At that time, I was driving home listening to the game, Jace, and you and I texted a little bit back and forth afterwards. And this is before Alabama's comeback. In my head, I was like, I don't think Ty Simpson has dropped back without being brutally harassed by Oklahoma any snap. And I asked you before the game, I asked you in our preview show, are we expecting a repeat of the last 2 Alabama-Oklahoma matchups where a couple mistakes here, a couple mistakes there will shift the balance? Or is Alabama going to right the wrongs? They're going to exercise the demons, whatever you want to call it, and actually look like they have looked all year. We said leading up to this, Ty Simpson's been bad for a while. John Mateer's been bad for a while. And to start out, man, I started getting into my head of like, okay, Ty Simpson and Alabama can't get anything going. John Mateer looks like the John Mateer from the first half of the season. This might be 30-3. This might be 45-7, 10. This might not be a close game whatsoever. Alabama ended up coming back. Alabama ended up storming back down 17, and they scored 5 of their next 7 possessions. This was Oklahoma's second largest blown lead at home since the stadium opened in 1923, and Oklahoma now has the most losses of any program in college football playoff history, having been winless in 5 playoff trips since 2015. Where do we start on this reaction?
Yeah, let's start here. It was the exact same game as it had been. Let me ask you this. Who had more total yards? Who had more rushing yards? Who had more passing yards? Who had a better third down efficiency? The loser. And it was what we said in the preview show, or when I was like, throw out the numbers, throw out the stats. It's going to come down to who makes bad turnovers, more negative plays. Oklahoma, brutal pick 6 to throw in the second quarter of that game. You missed 2 field goals, and you have a blocked punt. It was like the punter was a fine snap. He just dropped it, tried to get it off. Yeah. I think blocked punt is how it goes down the scorebook, whatever. This game was always going to come down to who made the dumb mistakes, who made the big turnovers, and who doesn't. And it's exactly what happened. Alabama had a good second half, absolutely, but I don't know if I would call 2 for 12 on third downs for 260 total yards of offense a winning performance. I don't know if taking 4 sacks for negative 35 yards is particularly a winning performance. It was always going to come down to who made the bonehead dumb mistakes. And in this game, it was Oklahoma. It was a bad pick 6. And granted, I saw this breakdown, so I'm not taking credit from it. And it makes the pick 6 look better from John Mateer's perspective in the sense of it was a really well-disguised blitz where the free safety dropped back out. And the way that the play was set up from Alabama, it was reasonable to expect John Mateer was thinking this was going to happen, and it didn't. But at the same time, it was a bad read. If you are a Division I quarterback playing in the college football playoff, you should be able to read a free safety. He didn't. Terrible pick 6. And then the 2 missed field goals. I thought, obviously, it's college kickers, and it was a really good kicker from beyond 50. It's unfortunate. But also, I think anyone that's been a college football fan for more than a year can tell you, if you are relying on 50-yard field goals in the collegiate level, you're doing something wrong as a team. Yes, he was 7 for 7 going into that game, but we all know college kickers, they're bound to miss. It's almost worse to have your kicker be perfect, and then how they handle a miss is tough. Plus, once you miss once, you're kind of in your head, and then the punt like that, it's just unfortunate. You drop it. And that was the difference in this game. It feels like every Alabama-Oklahoma game is just who doesn't make the dumb mistakes. That's how you come out on it.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned the mistakes, and you also mentioned the statistics and just throwing them out. Last time these two squared off, I made the point several times that Alabama had almost over 200 plus total yards than them. They had more first downs. They were better on third downs. They had less penalties. They had the ball for longer. Well, this game, Oklahoma had 6 more first downs. They converted 5 more third downs. They had about 100 more total yards, just under 100 less passing yards. and a little bit more rushing yards. That's a little skewed because of in college we alter the rushing yards because depending on sacks. It's like sacks adjusted rushing yards. And they had the ball for 7 more total minutes. But like you said, penalties plus interception plus the blocked punt or whatever that was, all that led to Alabama having the opportunities. And last year it was Jalen Milroe who we didn't know where he was throwing the ball, making mistakes. Oklahoma quickly got up and they held on to the win. Earlier this season, it was Alabama making mistakes. They weren't able to even have like good field position. One of the conversations going into this game was Alabama's average field position, like to start a drive against Georgia and Oklahoma, was like on the 25 or like the 30. And they barely had any drives that started, not necessarily punts or like punt returns or blocked punts or what's it called? Like a takeaway. Not any of that, but like they barely started on the other side of the field. And a lot of the times against Georgia and at the beginning of this game against Oklahoma, they were starting in like their own 10 or in their own 15. And when that was happening, man, I thought Alabama's lost their engine. I thought there's no shot that they're going to come back in this because I saw basically the same Ty Simpson I saw against Georgia, where if he had time, he could maybe complete a pass or two, but he rarely had time, one. And when he did have time, he was so flustered trying to get the ball out. I also had a text typed out to you, but I was driving, so I deleted it because I was texting it through Siri. But at that point, Alabama was down 17-0. And John Mateer, I think there was a couple mistakes that aren't in the box score, but there were a couple wide open Oklahoma receivers on a couple like times. Just busted coverages, but in the first half. And John Mateer just could not hit them. Now, could you imagine if he hit one or two of those? Those would have been butt naked touchdowns. So now you're up 17-0. It's great, but you could have been up 28-0. And I'm sorry, like Alabama's a really good football team. We both picked them to win, but it's not just the block punt or the interception. It's the fact that like we said tale of two halves for some of these games. It was like a tale of two quarters in the first half, where the first quarter, John Mateer was hitting guys in stride, making some really great plays, and it looked like I'm not just overreacting when I say this. It looked a lot like John Mateer was back. Like the 2 weeks off, 3 weeks off from not playing. And after now it's like 8 to 3 months off of the hand surgery. It looked like there's a little pain there, but he can actually spin it again. And I was like, that's a bad predicament for Alabama. If John Mateer is back to being John Mateer, like that could be really bad. We got to talk about Alabama though. What a comeback still, regardless. Like Ty Simpson ended up making some big plays. There was a drop by Jeremy Bernard where he was wide open. He was basically just like leaning back, waiting for the ball to come to him. And there's a reason. Like I'm not a football guy. I get it. Like I've never played at that level, but there's a reason people always say when you normally wait for the ball to come to you instead of you to go to them, you to go get it, you're going to drop the ball. You're not going to get it, or it's going to hit the ground. And Jeremy Bernard dropped it. I thought that was going to be a reason Alabama lost. Like, it was a first half of like what could go wrong, will go wrong for both teams, and then Alabama put their foot down in the second half and took over.
Yeah, I thought the Alabama defense in the second half took over that game. That's definitely the highlight for me from the Alabama side. The drive chart for Oklahoma is 3 and out, missed field goal, but it was on a short field, so they had 40 yards. Missed field goal, again, on a short field, only 18 yards. That was the entire drive chart for Oklahoma in the second half. The Alabama defense was dominant, and they were getting to the quarterback. They were getting to John Mateer. And the combination of John Mateer being a little off, as you mentioned, he had a lot of overthrows. I think him being a little off, combined, I think that pick six really rattled him. And then the Alabama defense got after him in the second half. And we'll talk about this, the importance of being the aggressor on defense, something that if you watch the second half of the Oregon game, that's going to be a huge storyline. They didn't do that. Alabama did that here. They put their foot down and said, like, enough is enough. We're letting John Mateer too much time. When you give him time, he'll kill you. They got after him and they sacked him 5 times. Like I said, look at all those 3-and-outs. Oklahoma wasn't really. They had one touchdown drive. Sorry, I missed that one. They had one touchdown drive in the second half. Outside of that, they were doing nothing. I was really impressed by their defense. That second half Alabama defense was the defense that I feel like we're used to seeing from Alabama in all these years prior. And if there's a world where Alabama's going to upset Indiana, that second half defense needs to be the 4-quarter defense. Because as you mentioned in the first half, they were lucky to only give up 17 points in that first half. Between the pick six and then numerous overthrows, they could have given up 30, but they really turned it around. So that was very impressive, especially for a team that's got a coaching staff that's much more offensive minded. So that gave me a lot of hope. The Alabama offense, I still have a lot of question marks on. They didn't do enough to, I think, make me feel confident that they're going to really, really show the world, we're going to go beat Indiana. They could, by all means. I'm not saying they have no shot, but the defense is going to be the proud point if you're Alabama. And the big takeaway is like, all right, that second half defense, that was phenomenal. We need to put that into 4 quarters moving forward. The offense, I think, has a lot they need to fix, and there was a lot left to be desired, I think, offensively for Alabama.
So now where do you see Alabama? Is this the one and done, or are they good to put up a fight against Indiana?
That's a good question. I've been wrestling with that. I think if the defense plays like they did in that second half, I think they can hang in there and put up a fight. My fear is that their offense is not going to be dynamic enough. Indiana is good at stuffing the run with just 4, 5, 6 guys in the box. I don't know if I think Alabama's lack of a run game is going to be a problem because Indiana does have a good secondary and they are really good at getting to the quarterback. They're the kind of Oregon has a Joe Moore finalist offensive line, one of the best in the country for however many years in a row now. Alabama or Indiana they're like the first and only defense to rattle that offensive line. Alabama's offensive line is not great. Ty Simpson was sacked 4 times. I think all of the issues we've seen from Ty Simpson in the last handful of weeks, Indiana is even better at all of those defenses at getting to the quarterback. So I do fear that Alabama will not score a whole lot of points. But the last point I'll say is the bye week is, I do think the bye week is pretty detrimental. I think not playing football for however many 4 weeks for Indiana is going to be difficult. And that could mean their offense starts slow. I think a defense is a defense and they'll probably come out playing pretty well. If Alabama can take advantage of the rustiness and keep it a low scoring first half, keep that game close, I like their odds to cover. Win outright, we'll see. I feel like Fernando Mendoza, I trust him more to make the big play than I do Ty Simpson at this point in time. It's going to be an uphill battle, and Alabama's really going to need to figure out how to move the ball offensively because they're winning games that they should be. I think they're beating teams. I don't want to say they're getting lucky, obviously, but they don't look good. Like they're not winning, and you're like, I feel really good about that game. And Indiana's a whole different animal than these teams they're playing.
Part of that is, I think, I'm not saying Kalen DeBoer, but the knock on the Washington team that made the national title game 2 years ago when DeBoer was their coach was, man, every one of their wins feels like a 1-score win. Like it feels like they could have handled a lot, like taking care of business a lot better. And I don't know if that's just DeBoer's game planning or what, but it's just followed him to Alabama. Now I'll say this: Oklahoma, stifling defense, putting up 34 on them, even with the miscues. Great, like pretty good performance. In terms of Alabama against Indiana, I'm like you. I'm wrestling with what I think is because Oregon and Ohio State had barely given up any sacks all year. And I forgot the exact stat, but I think it was like 15 or 20 combined sacks that they've given up all year. And Indiana sacked them 11 times, like combined.
That's crazy.
So like if you have an offensive line issue that Alabama does, if you have the inability to run that Alabama does, man, Ty Simpson might be running for his life again. With that said, I don't think it's going to be anything new for Ty or Kalen that they didn't play in their last 2 games against Georgia's defensive line or against Oklahoma's defensive line. I think for what it's worth at this point, Alabama has seen the better defenses that they could have seen all season. And against Georgia, they couldn't do anything. against Oklahoma, they clearly made some adjustments and were able to come back into this. Ty Simpson, by the way, I just going back to the game real quick before I talk about the Alabama-Indiana one. Ty Simpson throw to that throw to the end zone, like the deep shot, I think it was Latsier Brooks. What a throw, man. Like, just hitting him in the back of the that was ridiculous. Like, that's why we said at the beginning of the year, Ty Simpson, there's a reason he was at one point leading the Heisman conversation.
Yeah.
He was really good, and you just leave if you give him time, he's gonna be able to make plays for you. I at this point would almost take Alabama to beat Indiana, but a lot of this is not my official pick because that's coming in our preview show this week. I don't know yet. I have to do my research, but at the same time, I almost feel like this is a battle-tested team against a team that hasn't played in 30 plus days. So we'll have to see. There hasn't been. I say that saying I've been very disappointed by Alabama's offensive showing in the last month and a half, and so I don't have like hopes like that's going to be like a big win. But I feel like they're battle tested, that they can hang tight and then pull one out at the end. Yeah, that's overall how I feel on that. We can move to Miami A&M unless you got anything else.
No, I think we can move on to Miami and A&M here. We'll see. I don't know if I agree with the Alabama or Indiana pick, but we'll have that conversation on the preview show.
Dude, that's going to be the preview show convo, but I also have, what do I always say? I'm going to doubt Indiana until I'm right, because I've been wrong all year.
I really respect sticking to your guns on it.
I can't. That's why I've told you, like, I can't be in a position where I'm surprised by anything Chris Signetti does anymore. But I just feel like someone's gonna get him, man. That's what I feel like. But I've been wrong all year, and I'm probably gonna be wrong on that one. But like I said, that's not my official pick. We're gonna wait until the preview show comes out for you guys to hear our official picks. Let's talk about another game that just happened. Miami pulled out a 10-3 win over A&M. So we thought this was going to be the Alabama-Oklahoma game. Just an ugly, scoring within the teens. They didn't even get to the teens in this game. The lead up of the game, you and I talked about it like 2 weeks ago when the comment was made, and we talked about it on our preview show last week. And I don't know if you got any feedback on it or what, but I think it might be silly to just circle the comment offensive lineman Trey Zune made. But you and I thought it was a big deal. That's why we talked about it in our preview show. That's why it was part of our preview of the game. And by the way, after the game, it was confirmed that was a major part of this game for Miami. So for what it's worth, a couple of weeks ago, once A&M found out they were playing Miami, A&M O-lineman Trey Zune III told reporters that Ruben Bain and Miami's defensive line would be a threat that they don't need to worry about too much. So Ruben Bain goes out. He finishes with 4 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. He had 5 tackles total and a blocked field goal. Miami finished with 9 total tackles for loss, 7 sacks. The 7 sacks are tied for the most by a Miami defense in the last 6 seasons. And basically, so Ruben Bain after the game said, "We don't take kindly to disrespect. Some people said some things that they shouldn't have said." This was a major part of the game. Now, if you told me what we expected for this to be a major bulletin board comment and to affect the game, I still wouldn't have picked 10-3. Yeah, I wouldn't have picked a 10-3 game. I thought both offenses would get something going. Ruben Bain, it also should be highlighted before we actually break down the game how much better Corey Heatherman and that Miami defense are compared to last year. Last year, that Miami defense was similar to a couple years ago LSU defense, where they had a Heisman caliber quarterback, a first overall draft pick quarterback, and a really good offense, and just couldn't stop anyone defensively. Ruben Bain was actually asked about the defense compared to last year. He said, "We sat in the locker room for 15 minutes after the game, and it's just kind of crazy for us to win a game like that." Like, to win a game defensively for Miami compared to how last year ended, massive. So you got to give them credit on how they ended up. Is this confirmation that A&M was a fraud?
Little bit for me. I'm not. I still think they're a solid football team, and they played a really weak schedule. I think an issue that they had is when you play a really weak schedule and you don't get pushed to your limits, you don't get tested as much. It's easy to come into a game like this a little bit more confident than maybe you should. And I think like the quote is evident of that. Your offensive lineman kind of throwing out this quote, maybe not thinking too much about it. Another nugget to add about how much that meant, the Ruben Bain said that the defensive line made a screenshot, a picture of him with like the words, their phone backgrounds for the week. So like that, like just kind of be like, yeah, this is how much. So I think like a little bit, I think when you play nobody all season, you don't know what it's like to play somebody as big, as physical as you are. And when you do, sometimes you get punched in the mouth and you haven't been punched. So you don't really know how to respond to it. Kind of felt like that. Though I'm curious to see how much the wind factored into it. Like if you watch the pregame interviews with like
Clearly a
the
lot.
ESPN interviews, their hair was blowing everywhere. Like things were like the mic was picking up a bunch of volume. All the players' towels, you could see them flying around. And I think it was interesting because I've like been to football, tried to throw football in really windy days, and it's virtually impossible. Especially, obviously I'm not nearly as good as these guys, so it's really hard for someone like me. But like I was at the Oregon game where Dante Moore it was like 25-mile-an-hour winds, and he was throwing sliders, like no joke. It would curl like 15 yards, and they just kind of had to run the ball the whole game. And that was a game where people were very quick to say, "Oh, the offense stinks." And this was a game where I think people were quick to say, "These offenses stink." I think I'm willing to buy when your defensive line is elite like Miami, and their back end is a little bit more what's the weakness, and you kind of take out the factor of throwing anything downfield, it helps you a lot. I thought they capitalized really well. I loved the aggression from their defensive line. 7 sacks is unbelievable. But to answer the question, I don't know if Texas A&M, I want to call them frauds per se, because I think they had a good year. But I do think that this is evidence, like when people try to say that second tier of the SEC is better than everybody else, I think this was evidence that I don't think that's true. That second tier of the SEC is just like everybody else. Miami was technically a second tier ACC team based on conference standings, and they just beat a second tier Texas A&M team. So that's how I take that.
On the A&M side, I think I don't know why my mind works this way, but I immediately think about when Mike Elko said after losing the Las Vegas Bowl last year to end their season, they lost to USC like 35-31. I just pulled up the quote. He goes, "We can't play zone coverage. Every time we play zone coverage, we give up big plays. We have no concept of space, no concept of zone coverage. We have no concept of what we're doing, and we have to play man-to-man all the time. We don't understand how to play zone coverage. We don't cover well. I'm just glad I don't have to watch this defense play anymore." So I'd say that to say the 180 from A&M's defense from last year to this year, also spectacular. Like I'm not saying that to highlight, but like my mind immediately after that game goes, well, last year Mike Elko was complaining about the defense. Now he's complaining about the offense. What are we going to get next year? But Miami's game, and I texted this to one of my coworkers who was texting me like it's 3-0. And I said, Miami at some point decided to play something you and I are very familiar with, and it's bully ball Mario Cristobal football. And I texted my coworker this. I expect, unless there's a backbreaking turnover, Miami to walk out of this with a 10-3 win. At that point, it was 3, mainly because I was like, at some point, Mario is going to be like, okay, screw the fun plays, Shannon Dawson. You have the best offensive line, or one of the best offensive lines in the country, and our defense is taking care of business. Run the ball and take care of business from there. And boy, did they run the ball. They finished with 175 total rushing yards. Obviously, once again, that's sack adjusted. But it's not that Carson Beck can't make plays, but they took the ball out of his hand because they knew their run scheme with Mark Fletcher, who finished with 17 carries of 172 yards. They knew like that scheme was going to eventually win the game out for them. They're sure-handed. They're fast. They can block. They're physical. This is one of the reasons that like I think a lot of Mario Cristobal criticism is warranted and like right. But overall, one of the things that like when he was at Oregon or when he's at Miami now, one of the things you can confirm is that your offensive line defensive line combo is going to be damn good and really hard to stop in playoff situations. I'm not talking about week 7 against Toledo where like there might be a massive hole up the middle against your defense because you overlooked them. But in a playoff situation, when you need a play to happen, it's really nice to be able to lean on that offensive and defensive line. And Miami did that. They ended up running down the field days. Mark Fletcher, what a game, man. Like just 10.1 yards per carry. Like, I think it's funny because I'm sounding like I'm talking about how Miami's offense was good. No, but I think Miami found themselves in a situation where they were like, okay, our defense is giving them fits. If our offense can just control the game from here on out, we're good. I texted you at the beginning of the game because Miami took a timeout on the first drive. I'm like, that's so Mario Cristobal. But then how the game also ended was so Mario Cristobal, with Miami putting their foot down and just stomping on it, and not letting them control or dictate how the second half would go because Miami dictated with their run game.
Yeah, there's almost like not much to break down from this game and sense like what it means for these. Like both offenses looked abysmal. I'll give them the credit. Maybe the wind was really messing up game plans with throwing the ball downfield. So I was like, all right, let's run it. I thought Miami like started the game off way too cute. Like to your credit, like Malachi Toney dropping back to pass. There was a handful of jet sweeps and stuff like that. None of that really worked out at all. And then like to what you were saying in the second half, they're like, okay, enough with the trick plays, Bert. That whole thing, just run the damn ball. They did, and it started to work, and they actually started having a semblance of offense. It makes you wonder if they just started with that game plan from the first snap on offense, maybe they go score 17 or 24, in which case then you really start talking about a blowout. Defensively, if you're Miami, unbelievable defensive performance. That's going to be something like that is the rust that Ohio State could potentially have. If you're Miami, you need to jump on that with this defensive line. Don't let them get satisfied with this one win. I know that they, were able to they kind of got shit talked and then they came out with an insanely dominant performance. Don't let it be satisfactory. Build off of that. Because if you want to beat Ohio State and compete in that football game, you need to take advantage of the first 3 or 4 Ohio State drives where they're kind of getting in rhythm. That you need to, first of all, you need to stop them and not let them score, but you also need to see if you can force a turnover in one of those 4 drives. Take advantage early. And then also, I think hopefully they learn their lesson here. No need to get too cute with jet sweeps and trick plays and all of that. I think your strength, like you said, is your offensive line. Those are those trick plays and jet sweeps and all that. That's what you run when you feel like you don't have the edge at the line of scrimmage. Look at what James Madison did versus Oregon.
Exactly.
But when you do have the advantage, when you do have that, feed Mark Fletcher, feed Gerard Pringle. He only touched the ball once. Like the offense was slow, and then like you said, Fletcher in the second half they started feeding him, and it was also the beauty of once he started their ground game started going, defensive line starts to get tired, and then all of a sudden now your offensive line's getting pushed. Now every run for Fletcher is a free 4 to 6 yards. And if he's able to make a man miss, now it's 10, 12, obviously the big 56-yarder there late in the game to ice it, or not to ice it, but to go get that game-winning touchdown. That is the Miami offense, and you hope they learn from it. If you're a Miami fan going to play Ohio State, you want your offense from play one. Start with the ground game. Carson Beck is so much better when the game plan is run, 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 play action. He's actually a pretty damn good football player when it's play action and then everyone's blitzed and now he's accurate and he's good at making 1, maybe 2 reads. But when you need him to throw a fastball into a window or get on to read number 3, that's when Carson Beck starts making mistakes. That's when he starts missing receivers, taking sacks, that kind of thing. Just don't even flirt with that. I would say start with the ground game day 1 or play 1.
Well, it was clear that when it was 3-3 or 3-0, Miami was like, okay, Carson's going to get us going, but he's not going to be the reason we win or lose this game. So we're going to take the ball out of his hand. Mark Fletcher, it's on you. Offensive line is on you. And you're absolutely right. One of the things we know about a Mario Cristobal team is if they don't start fast, it's almost like Mario's just expecting, all right, this offensive line in the first half is going to be matching their energy. And then by the second half, they're going to be beat up and tired. And our offensive line is still going to be fresh because we're rotating guys in. We're the aggressors, and we're going to take control of the game. We can't talk about this game without mentioning the mistakes that happened on the A&M side offensively. They had 3 total turnovers. They had 2 interceptions, 1 fumble loss. Now, I think the only reason that this is different than Oklahoma, Alabama is because those were truly terrible decisions by John Mateer, or truly mistakes by like the punter and whatnot. Not that the 2 interceptions by Marcel Reed weren't a mistake. And the last interception ended the game, so I don't know if you want to count that. But it was more like, damn, Miami's defense, it was clear last year, it was like personnel might not have been the problem. It might have been the person calling the plays. And Miami's defense has been really damn good. And I still don't think they can probably beat Ohio State. But like you mentioned, them going up against a Ohio State team that hasn't played in 28 plus days. Ohio State team that the last time we saw them play, their offense looked a little pedestrian. Now, we think Ohio State's a machine. They're probably going to win the national title. But at the same time, if Miami's going to get them at any point, it would be now. And that secondary has pulled I really think the Ohio State-Miami game is going to be a lot closer than people give them credit for.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. After that SMU loss, Miami's defense really kicked it into gear. And it definitely starts with the front 7. It's way easier to cover a wide receiver when the quarterback has 2 seconds versus 5. And that's going to be true for Ohio State. But after that SMU game where they gave up 26, which is still not even an obscene amount, their defense has been shored up. Granted, it wasn't the most difficult of like offenses that they had to play against, but they definitely cleaned up. And then they had a chance to be tested by what has been a really good offense, and they were able to play really well. Again, I think there's probably some environmental factors that went into the way things shaked out. But the way that defensive line play, win doesn't matter in the line of scrimmage. It might matter on a 50-yard bomb. It does not matter at the line of scrimmage. If Miami's defensive line can repeat or at least play at that same level, I'm with you. I think they can absolutely give Ohio State some fits, especially, like I said, that first half. If you're Miami, you need to take advantage of the rust that it's inevitably going to be there for Ohio State. You have to take advantage of that. You have to capitalize on that. If they can get an early turnover and turn that into points and keep up a good defensive performance and go into that second half with some life and some juice, who knows what happens at that point, especially if Miami is ground and pound with their offensive line. We'll have to see how that goes. There's a lot of ifs in that statement, but I'm with you. I think a lot of people are just going to write off Miami and assume Ohio State moves on. Yes, that's probable and that's the most likely outcome, but I wouldn't make it a sure thing. I wouldn't write that in pen. I would pencil that one.
No, and we'll talk about that game again in our preview show. I think one of the bigger questions on Ohio State is, are they that juggernaut machine that's been just developing, Julian saying, that offense slowly with the best defense in the country that we've seen all year, that we think they are? Or are they actually a lot more pedestrian on offense than we had thought all year, and they just have a really good defense and a capable quarterback with a A+ wide receiver? That is the question with that. A question I have for you is, are you ready for Christmas?
I'm so excited for Christmas.
Hey, you got a nice hoodie on, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, it's a Flag for Discussion hoodie, custom made. We're not selling them, but if you want one, maybe I can figure out how to get it to you. If you're a friend, just text one of us. Let me know. Christmas time is coming. Once again, whatever you celebrate, I hope you have a wonderful week with your family. All I want for Christmas, we're going to figure out what these college football programs want. The first round of the college football playoff just wrapped up, Jace. We're going to gift each of these winners of the CFP round 1 games with a specific holiday gift that they need to survive the quarterfinals. So we're going to start.
I like this.
With Ole Miss, Jace. What would you give them as a gift to survive the quarterfinals?
If I can get fictional a little bit with the gift, I'm giving them a chug jug. This is a team that, like, oddly in that game, kind of late in the game, like Trinidad went down, was holding his head. He ended up playing he ended up coming back and playing. Lacey got hurt in that game late. They also their tight end kind of was limping around. Just get healthy. They looked really good. That was one of their better defensive performances in a little while. The offense was clicking again. They didn't look like they missed much of a beat from Lane Kiffin. They don't really need anything else. Just get healthy. Get back to full health. If it's a real gift, we'll just give them a crap ton of bubble wrap. Keep you guys safe. Stay healthy.
Bubble wrap Trinidad Chambliss and Kewan Lacey. Put them in a sleep pod. Don't let anyone go near them for the next 2 weeks. And your offense will be in a good spot heading into the first round. All right. What about Oregon? What would you give them?
This one has multiple purposes. I'm going to give them a nice, expensive 18-year-old McCallan. They need maturity. That's what this team needs. And also, I think for Dan Lanning's sake, he might need the McCallan to get over. That was a piss-poor second-half performance. Something that we haven't seen a lot from Oregon this year and hasn't been talked about is the youth of this team. And when people talk about how young the team is, it's usually in a highlight in the sense that a lot of Oregon's offensive production and back-end defensive production has come from very true freshmen, second-year players in the program. That's just kind of been the way that they're a very young team. Defensively, they have, I believe, one senior starter on the entire defense. Offensively, it's 2, maybe 3 on the O-line, but that's kind of it. We haven't seen the youth kind of come out. They've played great football season. This was the first game that you saw the immaturity. They had a dominant first half. If you watched that first half and you didn't watch the second half, you're probably like, yeah, this team's winning the national championship. If you watch that second half, it was a young team that was cocky. They were comfortable. They were overly confident. Even the backups were overly confident. I think they thought JMU was just going to roll over and give them this free win. JMU kept playing full foot to the, full acceleration, pedal to the metal. The young team of Oregon did not come to play in the second half, and they got destroyed in that second half. Yes, it still was not a close game by the score, but Oregon looks terrible. And I think it was almost purely due to just the immaturity of the players giving up on that game. They played 30 good minutes and 30 lazy minutes. They need an 18-year McCallan.
I like that. Hey, look, how do you plan on wrapping that thing? Or are you just going to give them in the box?
I'll do it in the box, and I'll wrap that box up for him. I actually, the only problem with that is most of that damn team is under 21. Only a couple people can actually drink it. Dan might need half of that for himself, just how angry he probably was. Based on the post-game pressers, all the coaching staff seemed pretty damn upset.
Very angry. I would consider giving the secondary a GPS, just so...
The backup secondary especially.
Yeah, the backup secondary, just like, what the hell is going on? All right, I'm going to kick us off with Alabama. Once again, we are the CFP Secret Santa. What are we giving Alabama for survival in the quarterfinals as a holiday gift? I'm going to give them a generator. I think Alabama has proven the last month or so, they just cannot start quick. It used to be at the beginning of the year that they started really quick and then they let their foot off their gas pedal. After that, they were down 17-0 on Friday. They can't start quick. So maybe if you just plug them into a generator, and it'll help them out. They're not at home. They can probably find a plug-in at whatever locker room they're in, right? And maybe that'll serve them well.
I like that. They need to play a complete 60. They keep having, the offense will play a good 20 minutes. The defense will play a really good 30 minutes. And it's never really at the same time. It rarely is at the same time. It's never for a full game. They need something to keep the energy up for 60 minutes. A generator, maybe a big truckload of Monster Energy drinks, something to get them for 60 minutes. It's a talented football team. No matter what detractions I say or people say about them, the only thing you can't argue is there's a ton of talent on the football team. It's just, can you keep the energy and can you keep it up for 60 minutes? A generator is something they definitely need.
Mario Cristobal. Now, there's a lot of different places you can take this. Maybe a Just for Men subscription. Not because we think the gray hair is bad, not at all, but when he took the Miami job, his hair was notably darker, and it was just a fun little meme there. I think now that you are past A&M and you are going up against Ohio State, you can't risk any of the Mario Cristobal isms, and one of those is clock management. So we as Flag for Discussion, are going to gift Mario Cristobal a giant digital clock. So he's just right next to him. He's going to know what's going on. He's not going to call timeout in the first drive of the game. He probably will still. But
he always will.
Yeah, it's always the first drive of the game, too.
First defensive drive. Yep. Their first defensive drive, they will call a weird timeout where you're like, why did you need to do that? And then like 90% of the time, too, they could use that timeout. They're driving like late second quarter and they don't have a timeout. You're like, why do we don't have that timeout? Oh, yeah. We had to use one for that 3rd and 8 that they didn't convert anyways.
Our current listeners know that we are Oregon guys, and we love a lot of what Mario did. But one of the things that we love more about Dan Lanning is you go into the end of the first half or the end of the second half, there's 3 timeouts left. Instead of like burning a timeout I think he burned a timeout against A&M with 11:13 left or something in the first quarter. What are we doing? So yes, we're gonna get him a giant digital clock. There's a lot more teams in the CFP. We're gonna get into most of those, but Secret Santa also wants to be a little giving, Jace. Notre Dame, they're not in the CFP, so I'm gonna give them Cole. But hey, this is a CFP Secret Santa. Notre Dame just walked their way in. They don't have friends right now. I mean, they came in uninvited. They crashed the party. What would you give Notre Dame?
Maybe like a Life 360 subscription or like a upgrade the Find My Friends app. Give them some community. Get them a conference is what I'm getting at there. I think, unfortunately, however you want to put it, I think them being in a conference would have boded better. Forgive my grammar. Sorry. It would have been better off for them had they been in a conference. Like, it's one of those things. I understand from the Notre Dame perspective, you don't want to be in a conference because objectively, yeah, it's better. You get way more money for not being in a conference in their situation. But I think from the perspective of making playoffs, it's probably only going to hurt them moving forward as things become more automated and people just get pissed off every year about that somehow. No one's ever happy with the way these playoffs get made, regardless if it's right or wrong. And I think they could use maybe some community in times like this. Maybe a conference could be beneficial for them. So I'll get you a Find My Friends app, upgrade a Life 360 subscription, something like that.
How about Brian Kelly just back? Just like in the area, not as head coach, but like they were in the playoff with Brian Kelly, not Marcus, I forget about last year,
Yeah, I don't think Brian Kelly could show face in South Bend without getting his ass beat. So I don't know how great that'll work out.
I think we're trying to create enemies of Notre Dame fans. We love you, but it's just kind of fun now.
I think that's more of a you push, but I'm all for it. I enjoy the banter of it. I gotta be
just
careful.
Because your buddy's a Notre Dame guy, you don't. Just because your buddy's a Notre Dame guy, you don't need to put it on me. It's.
I don't want to get my ass beat.
It's flag for discussion with Farbode and Jace. We'll have more Christmas and holiday stuff in our preview show. It will come out, I think, on Christmas, maybe the day before. Maybe I'll put it for the day before. And let's get into the other 2 games that happened yesterday. You and I have a lot to say about this one. We're going to try to keep it short. Oregon plays a tale of 2 halves game against James Madison. They won 51-34. They were up 34-6 at halftime. At one point, they were up 48-13. James Madison, credit to them, they kept fighting. Ended up losing 34-51 to Oregon. Now, before we even break down anything, I want to highlight James Madison, their fans. Their fans a large contingent of fans came to the game. We've seen videos of and beat reporters for Oregon said this is the most opposing fans we've seen since Indiana at Autzen Stadium. So that's 1, that's great. 2, they stayed the whole game. 3, it seems like the banter back and forth between Oregon and James Madison fans was just really positive. Everyone, people made friends, combining tailgates. And I think obviously part of that you have to understand is both sides knew what the outcome was going to be. So it wasn't like, I'm going to go in there, beat your ass. It was like both sides knew what the outcome was going to be. But just seeing that in college football is great. Now, the first half drive chart for the Ducks, they had, 6 drives? This is what it goes. Touchdown, 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 interception. The second half drive chart for the Ducks, touchdown, punt, interception, punt, field goal. Now, Dan Lanning was asked to describe his feelings after the game, and obviously he says the second half didn't match their standard. There's a lot to work on. He also said, like, I can't describe it. So that he's pissed off. Oregon defensive coordinator, he's going to be the Cal head coach after the season. Tosh Lupoy was asked about the game, and he goes, this is an unacceptable performance in the second half by our defense. I'm pissed off right now. We went to the locker room after the game, and I made that clear, and Coach Landing, of course, as well. If we play anywhere remotely close this next game, the way we did in the second half, we're going to have a disappointing feeling. I think we played a really strong first half and got complacent and comfortable. So I was very disappointed. We came out and had a 3-and-out to start the drive in the second half. So it was a good, successful stop. And then we gave up a fake punt and gave up a touchdown on the ensuing play. I was really disappointed in our overall finish in the second half. So that's Tosh Lupoy's take on it. Malik Benson, Oregon's wide receiver, also had a take on it. He was asked about the game afterwards. He said normally after wins, there's like music bumping in the locker room, there's celebration, there's people having fun. He said it felt like a loss in the locker room after the game. So I want to make it clear, I, as an Oregon supporter, you as well, I'm disappointed in how that second half went.
Absolutely.
With that said, I think the fact that like no one's beating it, like no one's lying to the media saying, "Oh, the second half went the way it did, but we won the game by 27 points. Who cares? We're going to get the team right. We're going to go to the doctor," as Dan Lanning says, fix the mistakes. There's some things we can get better at, and we're going to see how it goes against Texas Tech. Everyone's being brutally honest. That second half performance, it's not talent. That was effort. That second half effort was not going to beat Texas Tech. That second half effort was going to leave you going home on New Year's Day for the second year in a row. So I want the glass half full on my end of it. Tosh Lupoy, Dan Lanning, they know what's up. They know there's a massive problem in that second half. And to me, and you and I were talking about it before the show, you have to credit James Madison. They're a good G5 team. But when you are Oregon, that should not have happened. And you have to imagine there's going to be pissed off coaches for the next 2 weeks game planning for Texas Tech.
But yeah, when you're up 34-6 in the dominant fashion that they were, it's inexcusable to just get smoked in the second half the way that they did. To be up 40 points and then let the other team come back and cover is just bad. I mean, I know they're not thinking of it in that regard, but it's an easy way to look at that's how bad they were in the second half. And like I said, it was the first time all season you saw the immaturity. And the saving grace of seeing immaturity like that is usually immaturity like that comes at the cost of losing. Thankfully for Oregon, it came with a win, which means they live to see another day. Usually when you play that way, it's also after a loss, and it sucks because that's the end of your season. The hope, obviously, as an Oregon fan, the hope is they learn from this, they coach the players up, they figure out their weaknesses, they figure out what went well in the first half, and they are able to adjust and move forward like that. I think the objective take here is in the first half, you saw the team's ceiling. You saw what Oregon, they didn't get fully healthy, but they got healthier in the sense that DeCorian Moore was on the field. Gary Bryant Jr. was on the field. Neither of them had much of an impact, but you could just see impacts box score. But you could see the impact that DeCorian had every single time he ran deep. Guess where the safety over top was on DeCorian. Guess who was on the other side of the field running free for 2 deep ball touchdowns? Malik Benson. So you can see the impact that just being a little bit healthier had. When that team's clicking, they look unstoppable. That offense was unstoppable. Dante Moore looked unstoppable. But then you can also see when that team gets comfortable, Dante Moore starts to get a little cocky that every throw he's going to make is going to be a touchdown. Throws a bad pick in the fourth quarter there towards the end of the game. Just all around, it was a very interesting game. You saw the team's ceiling. You saw the team's floor. There's a massive gap. The floor is, if you're not watching, my right hand, the floor is below where you can even see on camera. My hand as the ceiling is going to go above camera. There's a massive gap in there, and they're going to be somewhere between that. They're going to need to be close to that ceiling if they're going to be a good Texas Tech team. I think that Texas Tech Oregon game, the spreads, if they dropped, I believe, and I think Oregon's 1.5 point favorites right now. They'll be playing in Miami. I think that game's going to be really tight. If we have a minute here, we'll talk more about the lines and stuff, but that should be a tight game, and it's going to be very interesting to see what Oregon team shows up. Do they get the effortless, the cocky version, or are they going to come out with their hair on fire?
I think you hit the nail on the head. The problem wasn't, and I mentioned it a couple times already, the problem wasn't scheme or talent. The problem was like wherewithal and effort. And I think that's why the coaches are so pissed off. I think if to be completely honest with you, if JMU scores 34 points or whatever they scored, and it was just they were making bigger plays, better plays, and they were making the play over our guys, they would be mad for a different reason, but it wouldn't be anything that they can harp on the players about. It'd be like, yo, you guys ran our plays the way we wanted them. You guys played, made the right calls. You guys did what you needed to. They just made the play. That's one thing. But the reason that, like, I thought Dan Lanning, the McAllen's going to come in really handy. If you saw him in the fourth quarter at all, he was just like kneeled over, like holding his hips, like, what the hell is going on? He was so angry about how that team was performing effort wise in that second half. And I think one of the clearest displays of that game being all about effort in the second half for Oregon was, if you saw a couple of the first half touchdowns, obviously there's the joke about number 33 on JMU's defensive line trying to catch up to De'Aaron Hill, and it was kind of laughable. But if you saw a couple of Malik Benson's touchdowns going downfield and Dante Moore hitting him in stride, there wasn't a defensive back within 10 yards of him. Like, talent-wise, once again, I have to highlight to everybody, JMU is not Northwest Dakota Mexican State. You know, like, it's not like some random G5 team. They are the best offensive and defensive, statistically G5 team in the country. They were both top in both areas. They were top 10 in the country in FBS. Now, obviously, it was against worse competition, but they have the best talent of the FBS. So at least, like, there's an argument to be made. Like, you still beat like probably a lower tier, mid tier Big Ten team, maybe in terms of talent. But you see Malik Benson just he starts his route, gets on level with the defensive back, and then just leaves him in the dust. It's like, that's just the talent discrepancy between Oregon and JMU. Like, you expected that to last all game long. And I, at that point, when the first half was ending, I was like, is Oregon going to score like 60 in the first round of the playoff game? In the second half, you clearly saw JMU was fighting till the end. Their effort was as high as it could possibly be, and Oregon's wasn't. And that's the short and sweet of it. Now, without acting too like 5-alarm fire, we've seen Oregon at their best all season. We saw Oregon at their best at the beginning of this game. They played 85 plays defensively against JMU. That's too much. They could have gotten tired at the end. It just wasn't a situation that I thought should have played out the way it did. But overall, I'm not, as an Oregon fan, as an Oregon alum, I'm not worried about how the 2 weeks, like, I'm not worried about the second half showing up against Texas Tech. I think if Texas Tech beats Oregon, it's not because of effort, and it's not because they're tired or beat up. I think it's because Texas Tech is just better. But if Oregon goes out and beats Texas Tech, which might call me biased, I still see as a real possibility if you watch that first half defensively and offensively, you can pretty confidently say, like, JMU almost did Oregon and its coaches a favor, just giving them the ability for the next 2 weeks to lay it on into the players. Like, that performance wasn't good enough. Let's fix it.
That's the hope. Well, it comes down to coaching. How much of your players bought into your coaching? How good is your coaching? And that's going to be what determines that Texas Tech game outcome. I don't have much of a feeling pro, like, Oregon, anti-Oregon for the Texas Tech game. I think that game is going to be very close. I think Texas Tech is a very underrated team. I think a lot of people don't take them as seriously as they should. They've been incredibly dominant this year. That's a game, unfortunately, I think is going to be really tight, and it's going to come down to the wire. Fun for college football, fun for everyone else in the country, but if you are a fan of either of the teams, probably going to be 60 minutes of a lot of stress and anxiety.
That is our Oregon breakdown. Let's get into Ole Miss Tulane real quick. Ole Miss looks like a machine, but you were right about one thing about this game, Jace. Ole Miss isn't 35 points better than Tulane with Pete Golding as head coach. They're just 31 points better.
That was
Trinidad
the only thing I was
Chambliss,
right about.
that offense looked really good, and that we expected that. And honestly, one of the coolest things I heard Pete Golding say after the game was So Charlie Weiss Jr. is going to LSU with Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin, and he's the offensive coordinator at LSU. He was the offensive coordinator all year with Ole Miss. And when Lane Kiffin went to LSU, he took Charlie Weiss, but let him come back to coach this game. And Pete Golding basically said, Charlie Weiss Jr. has been begging for an opportunity like this because everyone keeps saying that's the Lane Kiffin offense. That's the Lane Kiffin offense. Well, Charlie Weiss just showed everybody that he's calling plays. That's the Charlie Weiss offense, and he's a damn good football coach. So I thought that was cool. John Summerall is going to go off to Florida, build the team there as is. We'll get plenty more into Florida. They're not a playoff participant this year. But I don't know what Ole Miss's ceiling is. I think you're really high on them based off of what I've gathered. I'm high on them. I think that a lot of this is what we've seen from Ole Miss all year. So just for me, in terms of them going up against Georgia next week or 2 weeks from now, are we going to see if Georgia comes out rusty, then Ole Miss is probably going to jump on them. But if not, I don't know how we're not going to see just a repeat of their original matchup.
Yeah, I think so too. The Ole Miss offense, it scored at will against Georgia last time around. It scored at will against Tulane. It scored at will almost against everybody. And I think it will score again against Georgia. I do think we'll get an elevated version of Georgia. It's Kirby Smart. It's the playoff. If you don't believe that Georgia's going to be playing their best football in the playoff, then I challenge you to go ever watch a Kirby Smart team ever. Ole Miss will score points. Their defense is going to be interesting. Their defense this year, it bend and it broke. In this game, it bent and it didn't break, which was kind of the first time we'd seen that out of Ole Miss in quite a while. Yes, they gave up a lot of yards. Retzlaff threw for over 300. They ran for, again, sacks kind of set them back a little bit, but the starting running back for Tulane had 15 carries for 84 yards, averaging 5.6 a carry with a long of only 15. So it wasn't like it was just one big play. He was running the ball relatively well, but when push came to shove and when Tulane got down the field, Ole Miss was able to make a big play, whether it was a turnover, getting the stop that they needed, forcing a field goal, things like that. They stepped up. And I think that's a really good sign for Ole Miss. Going into that Georgia game, the question was always going to be, is Ole Miss's defense going to be able to do enough to get the one or two stops that they're going to need to beat Georgia? In the first matchup against Georgia, the answer was no. They had a lead for a lot of that game, but when they needed a stop, they didn't get it. This has to give you a little bit more confidence that it's possible that they can get that stop the way that they did. But again, it's Tulane. This is going to be Georgia. It's going to be two the caliber of offense obviously is going to take a massive leap forward. But I think it was promising. It was promising to see with the coaching turnover that they've had. They came out, they played hard, they played really well on offense, they played well on defense. They didn't seem to miss much of a beat, as you were mentioning with Charlie Weiss. He was great in this game. There is confidence, in my opinion. They looked better than I thought they would, and they gave me more confidence that they can go beat a Georgia team potentially. They almost did first time around. There wasn't what I guess I'll wrap my take up here. There wasn't much of a takeaway for me. It was the offense we expected. It was a good defensive performance. They're in the spot that they were in coming into the playoff for me. They're in that same spot now where I believe in your offense wholeheartedly. I have no doubts there. Can your defense get the big stop when you need it? So we'll see. They did against Tulane every time. We'll see how that holds against a really good Georgia team.
Now, my only pushback on that, or maybe I'm being a Debbie Downer, is like you said, they gave up 421 total yards. They gave up Tulane went 5 of 13 on third down. They gave up 115 sack-adjusted rush yards. They gave up 8.3 yards per pass. And I'm not saying that this would have been closer, but they also forced 3 turnovers, 2 fumbles, and an interception. Yes, turnover, a more Ole Miss-esque football game where they win like 41-27, which at that point you still feel fine with it because that's how Ole Miss has played all year. But the 3 turnovers, the stops that they had, it didn't keep them from giving up a lot of yards. Now, you mentioned the offense. I mentioned the offense. My last take on this is I was looking, one of the storylines I had going into this game was whose offense will get the push. And will this be a shell of Lane Kiffin's team? Or will this be Pete Golding's team, which is a continuation of Lane Kiffin's team? And we saw this was a Pete Golding team because that offense has not skipped a beat and they looked really damn good. You just hope that they stay healthy. Okay, really quickly, because the playoff also gave us clarity in other areas of college football. Kenny Dillingham just signed a 5-year extension with ASU. His staff salary pools up to $11 million. That puts him up near the top of the Big 12. His new contract will average $7.5 million over the course of the deal. And one thing I love that he did, and you and I talked about this plenty on Friday with off pod, obviously. Not that he wouldn't do well at Michigan. Like you brought up the point, was like his goofy attitude, his joking around attitude might not do well at Michigan. But I made the argument that like I think he has to do that because on one hand it's him, so he's him. That's what he wants to do. But on another hand, I think he has to do that to get buzz at ASU. And one thing he said after signing this contract was, we'll need one of these really rich people in the city to step up and write a check, and I'll do everything I can to make them the most famous person in the city. That's what we really need. We need one person. We live in Phoenix, Arizona. You're telling me that there's not one person who can write a $20 million check right now? There's somebody who can. They're trying to invigorate their donor base. They're trying to invigorate the city, trying to get somebody to be the. Now, there's not a ton of billionaires out there, but to be the Cody Campbell to Texas Tech, but somebody to do that for ASU. And I think Dilly actually truly believes he can do that. It's just not a quick build. It's a slow rise when your program doesn't have a Phil Knight or Cody Campbell that's an alum of your program. It's like he's got to go find it and bring him in. So Kenny Dillingham will not be the Michigan head coach, at least next year. He's going to be at ASU, and you and I were absolutely right saying everyone who's freaking out about him not signing his contract with ASU yet, everyone who's freaking out about him maybe being in the Michigan coaching conversation is missing the point. This is exactly what a guy who's trying to leverage more resources out of his current institution would try to do.
Agreed. And I wanted to say too, I'm proud of him for it. I think I don't want to call Michigan the easy way out, but I think it would have been, for lack of better words, the easy way out in terms of it already has the branding, it already has the money, it already has the funding. You kind of would just go there and you'd get all of that, and you could compete at the top level. Arizona State's going to be harder. It's going to be more of a challenge. It was his dream job. I give him a lot of kudos for sticking out the dream job and really trying to make it work. I don't even know if it's a matter of if. I think it's more of a matter of when he gets ASU to the level he wants it to be. It's going to be really satisfying and rewarding for him to see what he builds it to, knowing like, yeah, I stuck it out and I did this. So kudos to him for that. In terms of the Michigan coaching job, big 0 for 2 for them this weekend. Kalen DeBoer gets the win. He's obviously still not technically inked that extension with Alabama, but I have to imagine that's coming soon, especially if they can put up a big performance. I think he's out of the running.
He came out with that statement pledging his allegiance to Greg Byrne and Alabama. He also just won a game. So if Michigan wants the coaching search to last at least another 2 weeks before Alabama plays Indiana, because he's their absolute guy, you can wait for that. But mind you, January 1st is the day Alabama plays Indiana. It's also the day before the transfer portal opens. So if Alabama wins that game, then you're shit out of luck.
That's true. It's a good point. Some names that have been thrown out there. You did some good research for us. Jeff Brohm is one that Michigan beat writers have thrown out a lot. If I'm being completely honest, I think this one's a no from Brohm. He's an older coach towards the end of his career, and he's at his alma mater. This is where he's from. I think it would be weird to see him leave his like alma mater dream school to just go coach at Michigan for what's probably only a few more years until he retires. That just kind of, I don't know if he's chasing money at this point in his life, just given he's been a college football head coach. He was in the XFL. Like, I think financially he's doing fine. The name that I think would be the best move for Michigan would be Eli Drinkwitz. I think he's young. I think he's a good football coach. And I think Missouri's been a really good football team the last few years in the SEC. They haven't been able to compete at the top level. Like when they play Alabama, they lose close. When they play Georgia, they lose. Like, and it feels like it's for kind of the memes the kids say, like a skill issue, right? Like it feels like they just don't have the athletes, the size, the athleticism, the skill to compete against those teams. And I think that's something that if he was to go to a Michigan, I think the odds of them landing bigger players than that in terms of the recruiting rankings and stuff would be a little bit higher than at Missouri. I think he's a really good young football mind. He's really well liked among coaching circles. I think he has that kind of edge to him as a person that would bode well for kind of the Michigan brand and everything of that nature. So I think that would be a really good hire. And then the list beyond him, I don't know if I love a Kyle Whittingham. I think college football has kind of passed him, and he's the way he left Utah in a good way kind of
A
gave
little
me.
weird.
It was a little weird, and I don't want to like spew the exact words he said because I don't have it off the top of my head. But the way he talked about it kind of felt like the game's passed him by. He's not a big fan of where college football is at, and he's just willing to say like, all right, like enough's enough. I don't think I'm gonna do best for my career sticking around. So I just don't really see a world where it's Kyle Whittingham and then Biff Poggi. He's the interim currently. He's been at Michigan for a little while. I don't see him as a head coach that's going to become generational. And you've always had good commentary on what hiring the interim and what that looks like.
Yeah.
The list is running thin, is what I'm saying. I think Eli Drinkwitz is the last guy I feel good about.
So Eli Drinkwitz is great. He also, every year in, year out, he's a really good run game at Mizzou. He also took over Mizzou when they had sanctions. I think it was like academic sanctions, but they were sanctions nonetheless. It wasn't like what Michigan's going through, but it was still like some stuff that they had to deal with. Eli Drinkwitz would be a great option. His quarterback also just transferred out. He's Bo Pribula, maybe going back to Penn State. Who knows? Maybe going to play for James Franklin at Virginia Tech. Who knows? Those would be
kind of cool.
Without any without any knowledge of the situation. Those are my top two choices for him. But he's going into the transfer portal cycle without a quarterback. Ahmad Hardy is really damn good. Kewan Lacey came from Mizzou, by the way. So like, there's a lot of he knows how to evaluate. He knows how to recruit. The one question, okay, so the other thing I said was Jed Fish. He's been reported out of the coaching search. I wonder how much longer this would have to go on for him to be like, that risk wasn't risky enough. We have to start talking to him again. One final question for you on this search before we get more clarity on it as the week goes on. At what point do you hire Biff Poggi and say this is a 1-year interim, like how Frank Reich was at Stanford? It's like, we've gone through 3 scandals in the last 3 years. Let's just wipe the slate clean. Let's clean up the athletic department and bring him in. I don't know if you can afford to do that if you're Michigan, but you also, because you're Michigan, you can afford to do that, if that makes sense. Just Biff Poggi wasn't a great head coach at Charlotte. He's a high school coaching legend. He gives interviews with a cigar in his mouth. He's just a really fun guy to watch, but I also just don't know how many guys you have to go down the list of who might say no to your 3 to 5 year contract offer before you say, okay, Biff, you're the coach for a year while we go and search for the next head coach of Michigan football.
Genuinely, if I'm the AD, if Eli Drinkwitz says no, then it's Biff Poggi, just because you need someone before the transfer portal. And then you rock with him for a year, because the last thing you want to do is lock yourself into a 3 to 5 year deal with the coach that's just not good. It's kind of what they did when they had Brady Hoke and then Rich Rod back in the 20s. It's the same, and that set them back a decade until they were able to get Harbaugh to kind of rebuild that team. And even then, like, they weren't world beaters for the first handful of years with Harbaugh. You don't want to panic and then overpay. I know we disagree on this, but I would say you don't want to panic and do a Penn State and get a guy who I think doesn't move you forward, so to speak. And
okay,
I would go Biff Poggi if it's December 28th and you don't have a name. I would get somebody in to kind of help you out with the portal, and then tell them like, hey man, it's going to be a 1-year deal, and then try to get back into the coaching search next year. I'm curious where you would land on that one.
I honestly wonder where Biff Poggi would be on their hiring cycle. I think a lot of Michigan fans aren't taking him as a serious candidate, but some beat writers are saying keep an eye on him. Do wonder though, would Michigan want to do that for a long term, or like I said, like a firing Troy Taylor, Stanford, hiring Frank Reich? You have a full season and off season to go vet your next guy and chart the next future of Michigan football. Look, for what it's worth, if Bob Chesney goes to UCLA and makes them an 8-win team in year 1, I'm extremely impressed, not just because of how his team played against Oregon yesterday, but I'm extremely impressed by like the guy he is. You watch his press conference, he gets it. He's a guy who started out in like extremely low levels of football and built his career up, and now he's cashing in on it at a Power Four program. A lot of people thought Bob Chesney would be the guy for Penn State because he's always been a Northeast guy. So Bob Chesney, one of the guys. Or I know you and I might disagree on Matt Campbell. Matt Campbell, I think at Michigan would have been an even better fit. So if you're thinking of a guy like Matt Campbell, especially a guy who's like just clearly a stand-up guy, and you want to wipe the slate clean, have a 1-year break from the past that's been at Michigan football. Granted, we have to mention the national title, but the past scandals and whatever they've gone through, and you want to wipe the slate clean and start fresh the next year. And then you can probably go out and see if you can poach a Matt Campbell. You can see if you can go poach one of the best coaches in the country. Because once again, this is the Michigan head coaching opportunity. And I don't think we can get that twisted. I think, like we mentioned last week, is some of these guys aren't seeing this as the shiny, bright object that coaches want. I think that's wrong. I think in general, the Michigan job is one of the best jobs in the country. And if it was open on December 1st, or if it was open November 1st, man, so many more people would be in the running for it. I think Kenny Dillingham would have been great for it. Kalen DeBoer, I think he had interest in it when he was at Washington before they hired Sharon Moore. He probably would have been great for it too. But now you can expand that list if you hire Biff Poggi. And I'm not even advocating to hire Biff Poggi. But the dichotomy there is you're either going to go give Jed Fish a 4 to 5 year deal, a bunch of money to build something, if Jeff Brohm and Eli Drinkwitz say no, or you have the opportunity to go at least wipe the slate clean, put a Band-Aid on it. Biff Poggi, the guys love you. Keep the guys here. We're going to get behind you. If you do well, you're going to be in the running next year. But at least it's going to give us an opportunity for us to chart the next future of Michigan football.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say is I agree with that completely. I actually, like I said, I think if Eli is not the name in this current cycle, I think I'm with you. I think I just go Biff for a 1 season deal. Tell him, yeah, if you have a big year, we'll keep you around. Because I think right now, you're spot on with the names that Michigan can get are much higher than the candidate list that they stand right now. And I don't think you want to tie yourself into a name you don't love for longer than you think you need them for. So I don't mind going 1 year with Biff. Like you said, keep the players that might enter the transfer portal, see if that can at least keep them within your program. Then keep the commits for a year. Hopefully he can recruit with their brand well enough to make you satisfied for 1 season. And then go back out there, because you'll be the big fish if you go back out there next year. Then next year, come back in fresh. Bob Chesney's a great name to look out for if he has a big year at UCL. So I'm with you. I think if it's not, for me personally, just if it's not Eli, then go that route. Is it the most fun route? No. Is it going to feel the best? No. But is it probably the long-term best option for you? I would think so, especially if it's just 1 year.
For shits and giggles, I thought these names would be fun. I just was wondering what your number would be if you were these guys to go coach Michigan football. We'll start with John Harbaugh.
If I'm him, whatever Jim made, I would say I want more than that. That way I can make fun of him for it. So double Jim.
I don't expect this to happen. But there's a chance Baltimore decides to go in a different direction and John becomes available. I don't expect that to happen, but there's a chance. But the second one, Urban Meyer.
No, I don't think there's a single number that would ever happen for, to be honest.
Tom Brady, Michigan alum.
What's he making at Fox?
A lot of money.
Whatever that is, times 2, maybe. I think that Fox deal he's got going is top notch. That's such a beautiful gig he's got.
Yeah, and he's a minority owner of the Raiders. I think he's busy enough as it is. Ryan Day. Now, if you're Michigan, what's the value in you poaching your biggest rivals team?
What if they get Ryan Day, bring him in, pin him with all the scandals, so he gets a show cause from the NCAA forever, and then they fire him, so he's just gone? That would be more likely than him ever coaching a game there. I could not imagine that. That'd be crazy.
Connor Salians.
That would be very interesting. I would be very curious to see how that would work out. What's his show cause? Doesn't he have one too?
Yeah, I think he has a long-term show cause for a little bit. But I want to say one thing. I want to see Connor Stallings as the Michigan head football coach. I want to see if that manifesto works. Like, I genuinely want to see if that works.
If nothing else, you would guarantee a coach that is bought in on your program. Maybe to an extent that's illegal and might cost you, but you would be bought in.
Rich Rodriguez, round 2.
Yeah, bring him back. He's done round 2 at West Virginia. Maybe he'll go round 2 back to Michigan. That would be pretty funny. The hot rod, get him back in there. He can bring in his 44 transfers that he just got to West Virginia. Bring him with him to Michigan.
And then
I don't think that number would be that high. Honestly, that's impossible.
No. And then the last shits and giggles name, Matt Patricia, bringing him back to Michigan. He's had his fingerprints on the Detroit Lions. I know how much you love him, and he's killed it at Ohio State this year. What would Matt Patricia take?
Like $30 million a year. Yeah, I think with the overlap of like Michigan fans and Detroit Lions fans and the things he's done there, then that now he's wearing scarlet and gray. That's a number that would have to be unbelievably high.
I almost wonder if it's like reported that they're talking to him. Are Michigan boosters going to have a Texas A&M level of a fallout when they reported that they were hiring Bob Stoops? Remember that the donors and the boosters basically was like, we're not doing that. Don't do that. And then the offer got rescinded overnight. And then they go out and hire Mike Elko. If Matt Patricia was talking to Michigan, I think that a similar thing would happen, mainly because of his Lions days.
Yeah.
But, all right, couple minutes left. The college football playoff quarterfinal odds just came out. In the Cotton Bowl, Ohio State's a 10-point favorite on Miami. In the Orange Bowl, Oregon's a 1.5-point favorite on Texas Tech. Rose Bowl, Indiana's a 7-point favorite on Alabama. And Sugar Bowl, Georgia's a 7-point favorite on Ole Miss. So I want to get your instant reaction to these odds, but I also want to point out our full breakdown of these games will come out in our preview show this week.
Immediate reaction, Oregon, Texas Tech. I have the 1.5. I have I need to break that one down more. I don't feel great on either side. I do like the over, though, at 52.5. I do not see a world where Oregon stops Texas Tech often, and I'm not sure I see a world where Texas Tech stops Oregon that often. So I like the 52.5 over on that one. Kind of surprising with how many like touchdown or more spread. Like we could legitimately do a shot in the bark on Miami. Like that would fit our criteria, which is kind of wild for the second round of the CFP. And then Indiana and Georgia aren't far behind it. These spreads, something I'm curious. I want to hear your gut reactions too, but do you think that like these -10 and the 2 -7s, do they not factor in the rust from the bye week? I wonder if Vegas doesn't quite see the bye week the same way that we might. Maybe we overdo it because of Oregon last year.
I have no idea how Vegas sees things, honestly. But I think I would imagine that the rust isn't as existent because I think Oregon would have been favored against Texas Tech by 1.5 or maybe 2 if they played the week after the conference title games. Like if the rust didn't exist. I think just Texas Tech is an incredible team. We've been high on them all year. But I think the talent discrepancy is still at least a little bit in leaning Oregon's favor. The 10-point favor of Ohio State to Miami, I'm a little surprised by that. I think it's more because Ohio State, and despite them being very similar teams all year, Ohio State's just been more consistent. I just don't know if you're telling me it's a 10-point favor, I think you're telling me it's going to be a 27-17 game, which I could see happening. But I don't think Ohio State's going to go out and like blow the doors off of Miami, which normal 10-point favorites are. Entering yesterday, I saw this tweet. Entering yesterday, 22 of 41 college football playoff games were decided by 17 plus points. So anyone who's saying like it's all the G5 that's the problem in these blowouts in the playoff, I think you're missing the fact that like college football teams, despite even if they're like both really good playoff caliber teams, for the most part, they're not NFL teams where on any given day, 2 good NFL teams can beat each other. It just depends on like field position and turnovers. It's the talent discrepancy in college football from a really elite team to just a really good team can be Oregon, Ohio State last year, when Ohio State was an elite team, Oregon was a really good team with rust, and Ohio State blew the doors off them. In terms of my leans on that, I don't entirely know. I think Ole Miss is going to give Georgia everything they can handle. I still think if we get 80% of Georgia against Alabama in the SEC title game, Georgia's going to probably win that game. That's my early lean. Indiana, Alabama, I have zero lean because I'm feeling both ways about them. Oregon, Texas Tech, call me biased. I think the rust plus the fact that like the first half Oregon looked like a national title contender. Like Oregon to me, and I know we have a really bad taste in our mouth with the second half. Oregon to me in that game, call me biased, like Ohio State in the first couple of rounds of last year. Defensively, they might give up some yards, but they're going to shut you down. And offensively, you're not going to be able to stop them. They scored on 5 of 6 possessions. Granted, it was JMU. I understand that. They played that game like it was Oregon versus Oregon, as they always say. It's not Oregon versus the opponents, Oregon versus Oregon. I think at Oregon's best, they're going to beat Texas Tech. Now, I'm just curious how that ends up shaking out entirely. They're a really young team. And I would probably take the 10 points for Miami's favor against Ohio State right now.
I think I lean that way too. Definitely like a Miami first half cover, something like that. Just shaking off the rust. And anytime you have the trenches the way that they do, it's hard to beat a team that's dominant on both sides of the line of scrimmage. So if you get a good Carson Beck day, who knows, right? So that game could be good. And 10 points is that's a lot of points. Miami's not a bad football team.
Yeah. It's all right. One last topic that's not on our board, but I just saw a breaking news from On3 Sports Twitter account. Notre Dame's Marcus Freeman is expected to be a top candidate for the New York Giants head coaching job. Now, it doesn't say that he's interviewed or looked into it, but this is breaking news. We'll obviously cover it as time goes on. Could you imagine?
That would be I kind of had naturally assumed Marcus Freeman was going to be in Notre Dame for life. That also to leave for the Giants would just, he still absolutely could be. This could just be like, I remember the first few years of the Dan Lanning saga where it was, is he going to leave? Is he not? Oregon. And then eventually he just was like, I'm staying. Seriously, I'm staying. After like 4 or 5, like, no, seriously, I'm staying. He's no longer in, his name never really comes up now. I wonder if Marcus Freeman, he's kind of at like job 2 or 3 for him where it's like, oh, Marcus Freeman, I wonder if this is just one of those where like we'll have to hear it 2 or 3 more times and it's him saying no, where everyone's kind of like, okay, like he's going to be at Notre Dame. We'll get him off that list. Also, the Giants, there are so many better NFL teams. He deserves better. Like he deserves better than the Giants, first of all.
I'll say this. I tend to get on a soapbox about this because, granted, coaching in the NFL, I understand, is a lot of these guys' dream jobs. I understand that. I get it. Fully get it. My soapbox argument is there's a dichotomy here where coaching in the NFL might look like a better job to you. They still pay a ton of money if you're a top candidate. And for the most part, you're not recruiting. You have a bit of a social life. You're still in the office like 18 hours a day, but it's not like, oh, outside of office, I'm also texting 18-year-olds or 16-year-olds for 4 hours. There was when Mario Cristobal was at Oregon, there was a report like he sent 700 texts by noon. It was like you're not doing that as an NFL coach. I understand how the appeal for college coaches jumping into the NFL. What I don't understand is when you are at a Notre Dame, when you are at an Alabama, Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, when you are at the top of the college football cycle, where you don't have to deal with an owner, you're dealing with donors, sure, but you don't have to deal with an owner. You have a coaching situation where the second, like Marcus Freeman is going to get an extension probably off of this report. Like the second any report comes out, you're going to get an extension. You're going to get more supporters. And you're going to get more money. 94%. My soapbox in general is 94% of college football coaches. I understand why they would be interested in the NFL. Marcus Freeman goes to the Giants. Let's say they improve a little bit. 7 on average coaches in the NFL get fired year in, year out. But at Notre Dame, you have the opportunity, even if you never win a national title, to be there for life.
Mm-hmm.
At Notre Dame, you are the guy. In the NFL, you are the head coach under a GM and an owner. At Notre Dame, you are the guy, which I understand that he might have hopes of being there in the NFL. I just don't see it from the top programs in the country that give their coaches everything and have the opportunity to compete for national titles every year, why they would be interested.
I agree with you. No, I think you make great points. I'll add to it too. Sometimes something that us as fans as a whole kind of discount is the legacy that a coach can have. And with Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame, if he does win a national title there, that will cement him already as like the savior of Notre Dame football. He's already so well loved and rightfully so. But if he goes on a tear and he wins a national championship, he wins 2, he wins 3, the legacy that he would create within a very large fan base is unmatched. It's a legacy that would last for the rest of history of college football, and you would be beloved by millions of people throughout the country. Whereas if you go to the Giants and you win a Super Bowl, then you become, well, like we loved him as much as how am I blanking on his name? Famous coach that won with Eli Manning a couple times. I'm blanking on the coach's name. Tom Coughlin. Thank you. Like you just like, oh, he's our next Tom Coughlin. And then you have to win even more and more to just kind of be like, oh. But in the NFL too, people usually remember the quarterback more than they remember the coach. People tend to remember, like, look at me. I didn't even mean to do that as an example, but like, obviously I remembered Eli Manning. I could tell you 20 players on those teams, the Hakeem Nicks, I get the David Tyree helmet catch. You remember the players sometimes in the NFL a little bit more than you remember the coach.
That's
whereas
exactly
in college,
right.
we don't.
The coach is a star.
Yeah, think about Nick Saban. Think about the way obviously I'm not comparing Marcus Freeman to Nick Saban, but think about the way we talk about that legacy. Nick Saban is almost college football at a certain point, whereas like no NFL, like Belichick's the closest we have ever had to that. And hell, he had to win like 6 Super Bowls just to kind of get to that level where, so I'm with you. I don't always think it's the sexy step up that it can maybe seem like it is on paper.
We'll continue covering that as more reports come out. I don't expect him to leave. No insider info there. I just don't. I struggle to see the upside of going to a place where there's so much money and there's so much pressure from your owner that like within 2 or 3 years you could be fired again, and then all of a sudden you're coming back. The Notre Dame job has been filled. You might have some interest as a head coach in college football, but you're probably gonna have to start as a coordinator again. I don't know if you want to start that when, like you said, you can build a legacy. All right, long show turned longer with the breaking news. This is our recap show of round 1. We're going to get into previewing all. Actually, we probably won't preview every game because we got a couple weeks for that. But we're going to start talking about some of the previews of the second round, the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. We're going to talk about the Michigan coaching search. Hopefully, they've hired a coach by the time we record the next show, but who knows? A ton going on in college football. We'll have a choose your own adventure show on Thursday. Happy holidays, everybody. I hope you're with family. You're celebrating it the right way. And look, maybe we'll get Jace the head coaching job at Michigan if this keeps going on longer. From myself, Farbod Markazi, my lovely partner, Jace Hatfield, this has been Flag for Discussion.